So if you really want to understand the Middle Ages, you have to forget about kings and castles for a minute. The real power, the absolute center of everything, was the Christian church.
Exactly. It wasn't just a place people went on Sundays. The church was the ultimate institution. It controlled daily life. It controlled education, all the culture.
It was basically the wealthiest and most organized power in all of Europe.
Right. And because of that, it was the only major patron for the arts. So if you were a musician or an artist, well, your entire career was tied to the church.
And they had some pretty strict rules about music, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Music wasn't for parties or dancing. It was seen as this divine gift. It had one purpose and one purpose only, to praise God and help people feel closer to heaven.
And this is where literacy comes in, which is a huge point. Most people back then couldn't read or write, not even the nobles.
Right. The only people who were reliably literate were monks and priests. So if you wanted to preserve anything, history, culture, and especially music, it had to happen inside those monastery walls.
Which is why all of Western musical theory, the idea of even writing a song down, it all starts right there.
It does. So let's talk about the actual sound. This sacred music had a very specific job to do.
Right.
Its purpose was to make the liturgy, the church service, feel, well, epic. Imagine you're a peasant, you can't read, and you walk into this massive stone cathedral. The music was designed to create this incredible sense of awe.
To make you feel like you're part of something huge and eternal.
Precisely. And the clergy believed that singing the scriptures made the words themselves more powerful, more memorable. It was a teaching tool.
So the music would change, right, depending on the time of year.
Yeah, it changed drastically. The chants you'd hear at Christmas were bright and celebratory, but during Lent, the music would become very quiet, very somber.
And the defining sound of this whole era is something we call Gregorian chant.
Yes, one of the oldest forms of written music that we have. It's named after Pope Gregory the Great, who helped organize and standardize these melodies so a service in Spain would sound the same as one in Germany.
And when you listen to it, it has this very calm, almost otherworldly feel.
It does, and there's a technical reason for that. The key term here is monophony.
Okay, monophony. Break that down for us.
It literally means one sound. So a single melodic line. Everybody sings the exact same notes.
No harmony, no background instruments.
None. It's just pure, unaccompanied melody. And the rhythm is interesting, too. It's not like a steady pop song beat. It just follows the natural flow of the words being sung.
And those words were always in Latin.
Always. Which gave it that smooth, kind of timeless feeling.
So if there was no way to write it down at first, how did they remember hundreds of these chants?
Rote memory. For centuries, that was it. Monks had to learn them all by heart.
That sounds incredibly difficult. Who was responsible for that?
Well, the monks. Their lives inside the monasteries were built around this extreme discipline of prayer and study, and music was the backbone of their entire day.
Right, they had the divine office.
Exactly, a series of 8 prayer services that happened around the clock. They spent hours and hours every single day practicing these chants. It was a core part of their spiritual training.
But memory can fail, right? I mean, a song in one place could start sounding different from the same song somewhere else.
And that was the big problem. The church needed consistency. They needed control. If memory wasn't reliable, they had to find a technological solution.
Which was writing it down.
Writing it down. The monasteries had these special writing rooms called scriptoria. And there, monks would sit and copy everything by hand.
And we should stress how unbelievably expensive this was. They were writing on parchment, which is treated animal skin. One book could take the hides of a whole flock of sheep.
The effort was immense. And that just shows you how important music was to them. This need to copy and share music leads directly to maybe the single biggest invention in music history.
Musical notation.
Right. Before this, you had to physically go and hear someone sing a song to learn it.
So how did they start? What were the first steps?
Early on, scribes started putting these little marks above the words. They were called neumes.
Neumes. And what did they do?
They were just memory aids. They only showed the direction the music was supposed to go. You know, your voice goes up on this word, it goes down here.
Ah, so they didn't show the exact note. You'd have to already know the tune to use it.
Exactly. It was useless for learning a song from scratch. And this is where a monk named Guido of Arezzo comes in, around the year 1000.
The genius who solves the problem.
He has a revolutionary idea. He just draws lines, horizontal lines. He starts with 1, then 2, and eventually settles on a 4-line staff.
The direct ancestor of the 5-line staff we use today.
And that was the breakthrough. For the first time ever, you could look at a page and see the precise relationship between the notes. It was a blueprint for sound.
It's like going from a vague treasure map to, I don't know, GPS coordinates.
Perfect analogy. A composer in Paris could write a song, send it to Rome, and a singer there could perform it exactly as it was intended without ever having met the composer.
And Guido didn't stop there, did he?
No, he also developed a sight-singing system, using syllables that eventually became the do-re-mi scale we all learn today. The man was a legend.
So once they could write music down this precisely, composers got more ambitious.
Much more ambitious. After centuries of only allowing that single melody of monophony, they started to experiment with layering sounds.
Which brings us to our next big term, polyphony.
Right. We go from mono, one, to poly, meaning many. Many voices singing different independent lines at the same time.
And this is where music starts to sound a lot more familiar to our ears.
It does. It started simply with a style called organum. You'd just add a second voice that followed the main chant at a fixed interval, like a shadow.
So it adds some richness, but it's not truly independent yet.
Correct. But it evolved fast. Soon that second voice started doing its own thing, with its own rhythm and melody. This really took off in big, wealthy centers like the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris.
But this new, complex music caused a bit of a stir with the church leaders, didn't it?
It did, yeah. There was a real conflict. Some leaders worried that it was becoming too beautiful, too complicated.
They thought it might distract people from the words of the prayer.
Exactly. Is the congregation just listening to this amazing performance instead of focusing on the holy message? It risked becoming entertainment.
But I guess the sound was just too incredible to get rid of.
It was too powerful, so it became the standard for big holidays and special services, and that really paved the way for everything that came after, like symphonies and operas.
Okay, what about instruments? We've mostly been talking about singing.
The church was very strict about instruments at first. They really preferred the human voice, which gave us the a cappella style singing with no accompaniment.
Why were they so against them?
Because things like harps and flutes were associated with secular parties, stuff that happened outside the church. They saw them as worldly, not sacred.
But there was one huge exception.
The king of instruments.
Well,
The organ. It was the only one allowed because its sound was massive enough to support a huge choir in those giant cathedrals.
and building one of those was a major feat of engineering in the Middle Ages.
Oh, a massive one. They used huge bellows to pump air through all these pipes. The sound was physical. You could feel the deep bass notes vibrating through the stone floor. It just added to that sense of awe.
So for more than 1,000 years, all this music was sung in Latin.
Which was great for unity across Europe, but it also created what some people call the Latin curtain.
Meaning most people didn't actually understand the words they were hearing.
Right. They spoke their own local languages. So while the music was beautiful, the specific message might have been lost on the average person.
Still, the church had to teach people. So how did they use music for that?
Well, they used simple hymns with easy, repetitive choruses to teach important Bible stories and morals. They even created short musical plays called liturgical dramas that would act out scenes from the Bible.
And those are basically the ancestors of modern opera and theater.
The direct ancestors. It's fascinating. And what's even more fascinating is how they viewed music. It wasn't just an art.
It was a science.
It was a science. It was one of the 7 essential subjects, right up there with arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy.
Why? What was the connection?
They believed music was a form of applied math. The mathematical ratios that create harmony were seen as a reflection of the harmony of the universe itself, the laws of nature.
So learning music theory was like learning about the fundamental structure of reality.
That's how they saw it. And all this learning happened in cathedral schools. These were the hubs of education. They trained future leaders and, of course, the professional singers needed for this complex new music.
And these schools eventually grew into the first universities.
They did. The intellectual rigor required to master this music prepared students for anything.
So when we wrap this all up, what's the legacy? What does it mean for us today?
Well, the music developed by the medieval church is the blueprint for almost all Western music that came after it.
The entire system of notation, the staff, the notes, the do-re-mi scale you learn if you take piano lessons, that all started with monks like Guido.
The basic rules of harmony. The idea of a composer creating a complex piece of art that can last for centuries. It all traces back to the church's need to organize and preserve sound.
So what started as a way to make sure a prayer sounded the same everywhere?
Ended up inventing the future of music. The next time you listen to a big movie score or even a layered pop song, just remember that its fundamental language was born in a monastery over 1,000 years ago. Good luck with your studies.